Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. I actually didn't record a video yesterday, which felt really strange. I split that video up into two parts, and I felt really sick yesterday, so it's a really good thing that I did. I'm feeling a bit better, just a bit congested, as you might be able to hear. Whatever. At least my throat isn't sore anymore. So let's get into it. Today's video, I decided that I would go over each of the new Lemuria spells, go over their damages, whether they're good or not, and how they are. So we're also going to go over the spell animations, all that. So let's get into it. Before that though, go follow the Appleplex on Twitter. I follow them all the time. That's where I get all my information from, and that's where I'm getting this video from. So let's start. Starting with the myth one here, we got Barbarian Saga. You can see it starts as a 975 damage and then 305 after 3 rounds, which is kind of cool. It does like a lingering damage kind of thing. And you can do 2 upgrade paths. You can either do the top upgrade path, which gives 8 pips, and it does 1105 and 470 after 3 rounds, which is a massive amount of damage. Or you can bring it down to 4 pips and make it do 845 and then 145 after 3 rounds. So you can either make it cost less pips and do less damage, or cost more pips and do more damage. Personally, I think the better route is to always go the top path to do the more damage. Obviously, it's up to you, but personally, I'm more partial to doing more damage. So you can see here's the spell animation. It's a really cool spell animation in my opinion. Probably my favorite out of all of them. You pull this really special the old one pulls this really special glowy sword out of the ground and then destroys that lost soul. Then it puts that overtime there. What the overtime is, it's not really an overtime. After 3 rounds, it'll do the damage and then it will disappear. So that's really that. Next, we have Blast Off, which is the fire card. So this one, what it does is it does 955 damage after 3 rounds, and if there's already an overtime on the enemy, it will add an extra round to that overtime. So what this does, in case you're curious, it will add a ring around to the enemy, like similar to the Myth one, and then after 3 rounds, it will do the damage. It'll be useful for removing shields of any type of sort, before it does the damage, which will be pretty useful. And then it will also add that round to the overtime, which could be useful as well. So it's pretty okay. It also hits all enemies, which is an important thing to note. It's a decent spell, I would say. 955 damage is quite a bit. And if you upgrade it, it goes to 1210. You can also go the bottom path, which I don't really understand exactly why you would go the bottom path. I don't know if this is a graphical glitch or not. It says it costs 6 pips. I imagine this is supposed to cost 4 pips because it does less damage than the 6 pips over here. I imagine that's just a graphical glitch. I would say overall it's a decent spell. Not my favorite, probably. I'd say fire is one of the weaker ones. I can't say particularly that it is useful in a lot of PvE situations, but it is cool. You can see that's what it does. It doesn't do damage initially, just uses that linger thing. Next, we have Dark and Stormy, which is the Storm spell. This one starts with 955 damage and then adds a heal and a heal over time to all of your teammates, which is just a pretty cool spell. I don't know exactly why Storm gets it, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. It can be upgraded top path to eventually do 1105 and then do 125 plus 330 overtime healing. Or the bottom path can go 805 damage with 25 into 120 healing. I really don't know why you would ever go the bottom path. It's just not that useful. For this spell specifically, it's not that useful. Definitely go the top path. It's pretty good overall, and I would say its spell animation is my favorite out of all of them. You can see here. It's definitely my favorite spell animation out of all of them. Like, it looks the coolest without a doubt. And then you can see there as that healing. Overall, a pretty darn cool spell. Next we have Ice, which Ice's is actually a pretty good spell, I would say. Really, it's a more damaging spell, so take that as you will. Ice's spell is Freeze Ray. It starts off as 6 pips and a Shadow Pip, and it does 765 to 845 to all enemies. That makes it a very strong AoE spell, and it can either be upgraded to do 930 to 1030 for 8 pips, or for 4 pips, you can do 610 to 670. So, comparatively, Blizzard, which would be the normal 4-pip AoE spell for ice, only does about 230 to 260 damage. So it does about 3 times the amount of damage as Blizzard, which is pretty good. I would say it is important to note that you do need that Shadow Pip though, so it will take a while. I personally would recommend going top path for this one. It's really up to you. You can go bottom path as well. I would say bottom path is probably the most... it's probably the best for this spell out of any of the spells. I would say this spell is pretty viable to go bottom path, but I personally would go top path. It's definitely a good spell, I would say. As an ice wizard, you're going to want it for PvE a lot. It's a quite decent spell. Has a really cool animation too. So overall, pretty darn good spell. Next, we have the Grim Reader, which is the death spell. This one does 890 damage and adds 2 -25 weaknesses to the enemy. This is a pretty solid spell, I would say. It does quite a bit of damage for PvE. Even in PvP, I could imagine this spell wouldn't be too bad, especially if you went like bottom path. The weaknesses would come really in handy. But I don't know too much about PvP, so you're going to have to go check out another video on that. But I would say that this is a pretty darn good spell. For death, it'll be a major hitting spell, and it's just overall pretty solid. Bonk. Alright, so the next spell on our list is Lord of the Jungle, which is Life Spell. What this does is it is a hit-all spell. It does a solid 720 damage, and then what it will do is it will convert 50% of any armor protection on you to a damage blade. This spell is actually pretty darn cool, if I do say so myself. From what I've seen, it does solid AoE damage, and then also if you have that absorb on you, it will add that damage blade to you, which is really good for future spells. You can see you either go top path and do 895 damage, which is about 170 extra, and convert 50% of the absorb into a blade, or you can go bottom path and make it do 550 damage and convert 70% of the absorb into a blade. Overall, it's really up to you what to do. I would probably go top path again just for that extra damage, but the bottom path is very viable as well, and that extra blade is pretty darn cool if I do say so myself. Overall, a pretty cool spell overall, and a pretty useful spell at that. Bonk. Finally, we have Balance, which is Old One's Endgame. This spell is an AoE spell. It does 760 damage to all enemies, and then it will add a Prism Blade to your next spell, converting it to a random school. Overall, you can either upgrade it top path and do 940 damage, or bottom path and do 580. Really, it's up to you. This is just whether you want to spend more pips or less pips, to be honest, for more damage or less damage. Again, I would probably go top path, but bottom path has its purposes as well. It is a pretty solid balance spell, if I do say so myself, with the amount of damage it does. Bonk. And that's that. That is, you can see there's the blade convert the next spell to a random school. So that's that. That is all of the new Old One spells. Overall, when I think about them, some are pretty useful. I would say the worst one is probably Fire, potentially. It doesn't seem all that useful, but there are some pretty good ones, like Storms is pretty decent. I would say Balance, Life, and Ice is all pretty decent. It gives them good AoEs for the game overall. You can keep them at 6 pips, and 6 pips is a pretty solid number for an AoE spell, or you can upgrade them, choose to get them up to that 8-pip variant if you want to, or the 4-pip variant if you want to. In regards to spell animation, my favorite is probably the Myth one. I really like the pulling the sword out of the ground. I do really like this. I think it's probably the coolest of the animations. If not, I really like the Balance as well with the Old One's Endgame. But ultimately, that is it. Let me know what you think about the Old One spells in the comments below. I would say they're all pretty solid. Some are obviously better than others. And if you want to know what they do in PvP, because I'm sure that not everyone wants to know what they do in PvE and PvP, go to Gume's channel. I know that he made a video on it at some point, ranking each one of the spells in PvP. Pretty solid video, and can explain more than I ever could in PvP. So that's it for today. Make sure to drop a like, hit the sub button, go support me financially on Patreon if you wish to, and go join my Discord server. We're very, very close to 300 members. We're at like 290 something right now, which is pretty darn cool. But that's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.